Hey everybody, we talked about properties today in math, and I'm going to do a quick video. I had a lot of students absent today that may need to access this so they can get caught up. Properties are just rules that are true for any number, and they're kind of like shortcuts. If we know the property, we know what's going on, and there are addition properties and multiplication properties throughout today that we're talking about. So for our commutative properties, there's addition and multiplication. Associative properties, you see addition and multiplication, and then on down through the list with our identity properties and inverse properties. These are not properties for subtraction or division. Commutative means moving around, like you would commute to work. You could commute to work differently each day, but you would still get to the same place. You can add 7 plus 9 or 9 plus 7, and you're still going to get the same answer. Associative property is talking about the way numbers are grouped. So a big clue, if it's the associative property, is whether or not it has parentheses in it. The associative property is grouping 9 plus 4, so we have to deal with that first before we add 3. But we could also group the 3 plus 9 first and then deal with adding 4. Either way, we're going to get to the same answer, and that holds true in multiplication as well for the commutative property and in multiplication for the associative property. Those are basically saying this one says the order that we do it in doesn't matter. This one says the way we group them doesn't matter. The identity property and the inverse properties are a little different. Identity properties we really should know. We just may not know the official name to it. This is just saying any number plus 0 is going to be that number. Any number times 1 is going to be that number. We've been dealing with that for years, but we need to know that that's called the identity property. The inverse properties, they just basically say that the sum of something you add to its inverse is always 0. So if you're adding 6 to negative 6, you're going to get 0. Or any number, when you add its opposite, you're going to get 0. And it's also saying that the product of a factor and its multiplication inverse is 1. So the multiplicative inverse of 6 is 1/6. That's going to give us 1. And I tell the students to treat this as 6 over 1. So 6 times 1 is 6, and 1 times 6 is 6, and 6 over 6 is equal to 1. These properties do not work with division, and they do not work with subtraction. So be careful on that. So you can come back to this page while you're working on your skill sheet, because you're going to need to know the specific names of these properties as you work through these examples right here. The way we're supposed to answer these questions, if you read the directions, it says tell if the expressions are equivalent, and if so, tell which property is used. If not, explain why. So as you can see here in this first one, we're using parentheses to associate different sides of this equation. Think of your and as your equal sign. 2 times 3 times 7 and 2 times 3 times 7. It doesn't matter where our parentheses are on either side of the equation, we're still going to get to 42. And you can see how I've worked that out there. Starting here, 21 times 2. Starting here, 6 times 7. I still get to 42. The equation is equal, and the property is the associative property. In this one, it's the commutative property. It doesn't matter which order I go in, 6 plus 3 or 3 plus 6. I'm still getting to 9. There's my commutative property. Okay. On some examples where they are not equal, you can see here, your biggest clue right here is the fact that it's subtraction. And we already said that it doesn't work with subtraction, so you know it's not. There's not going to be an official property name for this. But we went ahead to prove why it doesn't work. 9 minus 7 inside parentheses we take care of first, which is 2. Bring down the rest. 26 minus 2 is 24. 26 minus 9 is 17. Bring down the rest. 17 minus 7 is 10. And they are not equal, which is why I'm using that sign. So we ended up answering this by saying no, 24 is not equal to 10. That's why we cannot give that a property. We can't say that that's associative or commutative, because those two equations are not equal. You can see another one here using the identity property. And again, to figure that out, you just need to go back and pause the video on that table that I showed at the beginning to see which properties are being used as you go through and solve the rest. In these other examples down here, we don't have to list the name of the property, but it wants us to use the properties to rewrite the expression as an expression that doesn't use parentheses. And so we're thinking, how can we do that? Well, there's a couple of ways you can do it. In this example, you can see I just used the associative property to put my parentheses around this part and solve it first. A plus 21 helps me get rid of those parentheses. It's an equivalent expression to the original. Same thing here. P times 1 is P, and I bring down my times 6. I've gotten rid of the parentheses. You could write it this way, but generally you'll always see it listed as the number next to the letter. There's a couple that kind of don't follow that rule. You got to kind of think outside the box, like 15, for example. There's nothing you can do with y times 3 because we don't know the value for y. But if we know that the associative property exists in here, we know that we can deal with 7 times 3, which would end up getting us to 21 times y, and that would help us get rid of the parentheses. So you gotta have to play around with them a little bit to see what you can do. And on the back side, there's similar examples to what was on the front. This top part is just like the front on the other side. This is like the bottom on the other side. And then there's a couple of word problems here asking you to write some equations, to write down how you would solve things mentally. And this one just specifically tells you to write some equations with the associative property. So pause this video if you need to. While you're completing this, this is something that we took for a grade. So if you were absent or were out, you need to ask me about this when you get back so that you can complete it and turn it in. All right, thanks for watching.